Once upon a time, in a grand castle painted in shades of sunlight and pearl, lived a beautiful princess named Snow White. Her hair was as dark as a midnight sky, her skin was as white as freshly fallen snow, and her lips were the color of the reddest rose. She was known throughout the kingdom not just for her beauty, but for her incredibly kind heart. She would sing sweet songs to the little birds that visited her window, and she always shared her bread with the squirrels in the castle garden. Everyone who knew Snow White loved her dearly, for her spirit was as bright and warm as a summer's day. Snow White lived with her stepmother, a queen who was very beautiful on the outside but held a cold and jealous heart within. The queen owned a magical mirror, and every single day she would stand before it and ask the same question. Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? For years the mirror always gave the same answer, telling the queen that she was the most beautiful in the land. This made the queen very happy and very proud, and she spent her days admiring her own reflection, never showing any kindness to her lovely stepdaughter. One morning the sun streamed through the stained glass windows, and the queen stood before her mirror as she always did. She asked her usual question, expecting the usual reply that would soothe her vanity. But on this day, the mirror's voice, which shimmered like silver, spoke a different truth. "My queen, you are very fair, it is true," the mirror announced. "But a young princess named Snow White is 1,000 times more fair than you." The queen's face turned pale with shock, and then twisted with a terrible and consuming jealousy. She could not bear the thought of anyone being more beautiful than her. The queen's heart filled with a dark and stormy anger. She decided right then and there that she had to get rid of Snow White forever. Her jealousy was a poison that clouded her thoughts and made her cruel. She called for her most trusted huntsman and gave him a wicked order. She told him to take Snow White deep into the forest, far away from the castle, and to leave her there so she would never be seen again. The queen thought that with Snow White gone, her magic mirror would once again declare her the fairest, and her vanity would be satisfied. The kind huntsman could not bring himself to harm the sweet princess. When they were deep in the woods, with tall trees looming all around them, he told Snow White about the queen's terrible plan. He urged her to run away and never come back to the castle. Frightened but brave, Snow White thanked him and ran as fast as her legs could carry her, deeper and deeper into the forest. The woods seemed dark and scary at first, with shadows that looked like grasping hands, but soon, her animal friends, the deer, rabbits, and squirrels, came to comfort her and guide her along a hidden path. After walking for a long time, Snow White stumbled upon a clearing. In the middle of the clearing stood a tiny, charming cottage with a thatched roof and a crooked chimney. It looked like it was built for dolls. Curious, she knocked on the little door, but no one answered. The door creaked open, so she peeked inside. The cottage was a bit messy, with 7 small chairs, 7 little plates on a table, and 7 tiny beds all in a row upstairs. It was clear that some very small people lived here, and Snow White felt a sense of warmth and safety. Feeling helpful, Snow White decided to tidy up the cottage as a thank you for sheltering her. With the help of her woodland friends, she washed the dishes, swept the floors, and dusted the tiny furniture until the whole place sparkled. By the time she was finished, she was very tired. She saw the 7 little beds and thought she would just rest for a moment. Yawning, she lay down across a few of them and quickly fell into a deep and peaceful sleep, dreaming of a safe and happy place far away from the jealous queen and her cold castle. Later that evening, the owners of the cottage returned home from their work in the nearby mines. They were 7 dwarfs, each with a unique and wonderful personality. There was Doc, the clever leader, Grumpy, who pretended to be cross but had a soft heart, Happy, who was always smiling, Sleepy, who was always yawning, Bashful, who was very shy, Sneezy, who had a powerful sneeze, and Dopey, who was silly and sweet. They were surprised to find their cottage so clean, and even more surprised to find a beautiful princess sleeping in their beds. Back at the castle, the evil queen was feeling quite pleased with herself. She believed that Snow White was gone for good. Confidently, she stood before her magic mirror and asked her favorite question once more. "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" She expected to hear her own name, but the mirror's voice echoed with a truth she did not want to hear. Over the 7 jeweled hills beyond the 7th fall, the mirror revealed in the cottage of the 7 dwarfs, Snow White is the fairest of them all. The queen shrieked with fury, her face contorting with rage. The queen's jealousy burned hotter than ever before. She realized the huntsman had tricked her, and now she would have to take matters into her own wicked hands. She went down to a secret dusty room in the castle's dungeon, a place filled with bubbling potions and ancient spellbooks. Using her dark magic, she disguised herself as an old hunched peddler woman with a wrinkled face and a shaky voice. She filled a basket with shiny ribbons and colorful silks, but among them, she placed a special poisoned comb, crafted to make anyone who used it fall into a deep, endless sleep. The disguised queen traveled through the forest until she found the dwarf's cottage. She saw Snow White singing to her animal friends and knew her plan would work. When the dwarfs were away at the mine, the queen knocked on the door. Snow White, with her trusting heart, opened it to the seemingly harmless old woman. The peddler offered her beautiful laces for her dress, and Snow White was delighted. But as the old woman tightened a pretty lace around her waist, it was so tight that Snow White couldn't breathe and fainted onto the floor. The queen cackled and hurried away, thinking she had won. Luckily, the 7 dwarfs returned home early that day and found Snow White lying on the floor, pale and still. Doc, with his quick thinking, immediately saw the tightly tied lace and carefully cut it with his scissors. As soon as the lace was loosened, Snow White took a deep breath, and her eyes fluttered open. She was safe. Her friends hugged her tightly, warning her to be more careful and not to let any strangers into the cottage. Though she was scared, Snow White was incredibly grateful for her clever and caring friends who had saved her. The queen returned to her castle, certain that her plan had finally worked. She rushed to her magic mirror, her voice dripping with triumph, and asked, "Magic mirror on the wall, who now is the fairest one of all?" To her utter horror, the mirror replied with the same infuriating answer. Snow White, living happily in the dwarf's cottage, was still the most beautiful in the land. The queen was beside herself with rage. She decided she needed a trick so powerful that it could not possibly fail. This time, she would use her most potent magic. She went back to her secret chamber and brewed her most wicked creation yet, a poison that would put someone into a sleep so deep it looked just like death, with only love's first kiss as the cure. She dipped a perfect shiny red apple into the potion, leaving one half untouched and the other half filled with the sleeping curse. Disguising herself again, this time as a simple farmer's wife, she set off for the cottage, determined to succeed. The apple looked so delicious and harmless, glowing with a tempting red sheen that would be impossible to resist. When she arrived, Snow White was hesitant, remembering the dwarf's warning, but the clever queen offered to share the apple, taking a bite from the safe white side herself, to show it was harmless. Seeing this, Snow White felt it was safe and took a single bite from the poisoned red side. Instantly, the curse took hold, and she fell to the ground in a deep, unbreakable sleep. The dwarfs returned to find their beloved princess lying still, the poisoned apple beside her. They were heartbroken, thinking she was gone forever, and they built a beautiful glass coffin to watch over her. One day, a kind prince who had heard tales of the beautiful princess with hair as black as night came riding through the forest. He saw Snow White in the glass coffin and was struck by her beauty and the dwarf's sorrow. He asked if he could give her a farewell kiss. As his lips touched hers, the spell was broken. Snow White's eyes opened and she sat up, smiling. The dwarfs cheered with joy. The news of the queen's evil deeds spread, and she was banished from the kingdom forever. Snow White, the prince, and the 7 dwarfs returned to the castle, where they all lived happily, celebrating the true magic of friendship and kindness.